Vladislav stood alone by the nearly buried grave, his heart clutched inside of longing. Everyone who had attended his wife Elvira's funeral as well as burial had already left. With the exception of Vladislav couldn't tear his gaze away that was by the small mound that belongs to Earth inside the freshly painted fence, with an existing small makeshift memorial topped tightly with wreaths. Love, remembering, dear daughter, cherished spouse happened to be written on top of the ribbons that surrounded the wreaths. Thoughts happened to be jumbled, interfering with one another as well as disappearing incomplete. Vladislav took an existing seat on top of the bench next to his wife's grave. Why this happens to be the case, Aleshko? Why? Why have she abandoned him? He was screaming to her grave. How was he supposed to wake up alone as well as fall asleep without her? How was he going to get through the day on the possibility that he could not hear her vivacious, captivating laughter? Why her kind hands are not going to never again caress his hair, as well as she is going to never again hug him with an existing smile, alleviating him that belongs to every single one his sorrows as well as sufferings. This isn't right, Aleshka. She shouldn't have gone before her. The man buried his face inside of his hands, as well as sobbed violently. Exactly during the same time that he had done during the same time that an existing youngster at the time where he had lost his mother. Vladislav as well as Elvira initially met inside of the institute, where they instantly recognized one another. They met at the institute canteen, sat at the same table, as well as didn't see each other again. They had an existing wedding after college, an existing cheap student wedding that happened to be raucous as well as joyful. Following graduation, the pair happened to be assigned to an existing modest room inside of the company's dormitory. The newlyweds, on top of the other hand, happened to be thrilled because they had found each other right away, rather than through trial as well as error. It happened to be simply fate's decision to take an existing shortcut to happiness. Ilya was occupied with organizing things while Slava worked, but he worked hard and persistently, and he soon achieved substantial achievement. It had been normal in their family for Slava to be the earner and Ilya to be the home's hearth. This agreement was imposed by the spouse himself. It was crucial to him to come home to a cozy, recently received flat, where everything was shining with cleanliness, and where there was always a table spread with lunch and dinner prepared by his wife's tender hands, and where he was always greeted at the threshold by the wonderfully dressed Ilya. She assisted him in removing his coat. They sat at the elegantly set table. When his wife questioned him about his day, he completely relaxed, succumbing to the magic of warmth and love. He never refused his wife. He spent a lot of money on jewels and produced thoughtful gifts. Fortunately, a man has attained a high position at work, which he has aided by the rear arranged by a caring wife. Vladislav had faith in his wife, as he had in no one else. Their family served as an example of family loyalty and well-being. Even on long business trips where Ilya was unable to accompany him, the guy had complete faith in his wife. She would phone her husband numerous times a day, reminding him to eat and giving him advice on what to wear to a specific function. The man was amused by such tender care. Aleshka in miniature. It's actually rather amusing. He is an adult now and he can look after himself in some way. What a mature young dude. Laughed. Do you remember the photos you brought from your previous business trip, Ilya? Her mature husband is seated at a table with serious individuals, and different colored socks poke out from under his trousers. Vladislav felt embarrassed to make excuses at moments like this. That's all he have got. He dressed once in the dark, and that is something you will never forget. The fact that he and his wife did not have children was the one thing that bothered him. Things were not going well. They went to a variety of specialized clinics but had no results. Then Vladislav offered his wife to take a child from the infant home, but they constantly met unexpectedly. Elvira flatly refused. Why? Ilya, her husband, was taken aback. They're the same kids. Little vulnerable children in desperate need of parental love and care. They were born unlucky, making them even more destitute. No, the wife steadfastly resisted. She only wanted their child and was not going to accept someone else's. The child must have hers and his physical and psychological characteristics. She had to think of it as an extension of her and him, and she was not going to consent to anything else. Vladislav was astonished by his wife's strong refusal, but he accepted it and has never considered adoption again. The couple now lived together, paying all of their love and attention to each other. Everything would have been okay, but difficulty arose from unexpected sources. Navarro was diagnosed with a malignant tumor, the last stage of which had been neglected and could not be removed medically. It seemed as though Vladislav's life had come to a halt, He was no longer aware of what was going on around him. His ailing wife became the focus of the universe at work, in the city, and throughout the world. The dad took a long leave from work because he had no one to look after Ilya. How many doors Vladislav knocked on in his search for a cure for Elvira's ailment, and how many times he convinced, pleaded, and insisted Elvira accept to the surgery. Ilya, he discovered a hospital in Germany that will perform the procedure. They were running out of time. It's a shame she had to leave him alone. It's such a non-adaptable, self-sufficient one. Vladislav often turned away from his wife at such times, so she wouldn't see the tears streaming down his cheeks. One day the man was sitting near his wife's bed, reading aloud an old novel, when he fell asleep. He awoke in a cold sweat and clutched Elliot's hand. Elliot had a dream that she had left. He tried to smile, but his lips trembled. Ilya remained silent. She'd already drifted off to sleep, leaving him alone. It appeared as if he was snoozing. He was able to catch her dying breath. Vladislav grieved severely as he sat beside Ilya's grave, unable to force himself to return home. His kind and charming Aleshka, his beloved wife who had devoted herself to his care, would stay here underneath. Finally, the man stood up and proceeded slowly towards the house, turning around every now and again to look for a new grave. Vladislav walked into a bedroom and lay down on the side of his wife with his shoes on, and lived for a long time, breathing in such a treasured smell, even if it was empty and frigid at home, just as it was at heart. It got fairly dark. He sat down on the bed, turned on the nightlight, and took a framed portrait from the nightstand. They were very upbeat and amusing. None of them were thinking about death. Human beings are mortal, as Wallen remarked in The Master and Margarita, but that's okay. The bad news is that they can die at any time. These comments could not have expressed his situation better. He had never expected to lose his loving wife so soon. Suddenly, his fingertips felt an inexplicable thickening in the frame. The man disassembled the frame, removed the glass, and discovered another image behind theirs. An unfamiliar baby was seen in the antique photograph. Vladislav turned the photo and read a weird inscription, which he didn't understand. The date Vitaly and Vladislavovich. There are no further explanations. The man turned the photo in his hands for a long time, attempting to figure out what it all meant, while the child's patronymic was his own. Why the date when they'd been married for several years, and why, after all? Did his wife save the picture, and also keep it a secret from him? Unbelievable suspicions began to form in my head. Impatiently, Vladislav removed his jacket and proceeded to his wife's dressing table. He discovered a stack of letters after pulling out many drawers. It was Elvira's correspondence with her out-of-town childhood pal, Veronica. Taking up the last letter, she read through the greetings and gossip. Ilya, the man read, shuddering with foreboding, while she hadn't seen Vitalik in 2 months, so she paid him a visit. And what a lovely boy he is. You should observe how he squints like his father. Vladislav's pulse beat faster. Squinting like his father, he too squinted his eyes when he spoke. It couldn't be true. He began by opening each letter in turn and reading from the first to the final word. Lines and letters flashed before his eyes, forming a distinct image. But what exactly was it? It was unheard of, ugly and horrible. A disgrace to his beloved excellent Ilya, whose decency he had never questioned. It found out that he was on one of his lengthy business travels. His wife had carried and given birth to a child, his son, and had signed the infant over to the maternity hospital. The boy was born with a congenital cardiac problem, and physicians urged that he be left alone. Vladislav gripped the boy's head and groaned, convinced he wouldn't live long. "Ilya, what have you done? What happened? Why didn't you tell me everything? This is our child. How did you manage to pull this off? By abandoning the kid, we betrayed him." Unable to cope with his anguish, the man walked into the kitchen, poured himself a glass of vodka, and gulped it down in one go. So he sat in the kitchen, drinking but not becoming drunk, and not turning on the light till daybreak. Vladislav awoke to the first rays of the sun, phoned a taxi, and drove to his homeland. Slava. The man's untidy appearance terrified her. "What's the deal with you? What brings you here? Why are you dressed in that manner?"